Linder and Stacy Cannon from Gensler.
Hello.
Great. Okay. Thank you, everyone. We're really happy and honored to be here. I see a lot of friends in the industry, clients, vendors. So we have kind of an interesting topic today. Hopefully it was intriguing, and that's why you guys are all here. We'll kind of talk through this. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, please raise your hand. It's meant to be interactive as possible.
There we go. So I'm going to start out a little bit. The workplace has changed a lot. So you're starting to see some of the imagery where you have the 1800s where you have all the benches lined up, workspace, and that transitioning through to traditional, what we would traditionally call office-heavy, workstation-heavy, focused spaces. As you go through the timeline of space, we're really starting to get into what we're calling the connected workplace. And what does that mean? It means a lot of different things from a lot of different companies and different work modes. And really, it's about catering your space to how are you really working, and how does your space start to balance and support what you do and what your company does. It's less of one size fits all, and it's more about catering that space to what you need. So within that connected workspace, you're starting to see where we call formal spaces. So you still need those formal work areas, so whether that be an office, whether that be a conference room, whether that be a focus room, something that's a little bit more structured. So you still need those spaces. How many you need, what type of those spaces, depends on how you work. You see the team-oriented spaces. Those may be the open collaboration tables. Those may be outside spaces. They may mean different things, but it's about bringing teams together and what type of spaces those team spaces need to be. Co-working. So you've all heard co-working. You see the WeWorks, the rented desks, free address. There's all different models of that. Some work for some companies. Some are completely free address, where you don't have an assigned desk. You work in an area that you need for that day. Tomorrow you may need a different space. What type of model works, and then how functionally you manage that as a facility manager. How does that, what are the challenges that get brought up in that case? And then the working labs. So these are what we call hackable spaces. These are, today it may be a conference room, tomorrow it may be sales space, the next day it may be different things, but it can change in based on what you need to use it for that space. So these are different ways that you're starting to see the workplace start to cater to what you're actually doing every day. So what you're seeing here, and we won't go through all of the notes, but the formal model. And this is your formal working spaces. Traditionally, we used to see the exterior offices. I think our more standard formal model that we're seeing today is at least moving those offices inboard. And that's get all of the natural light to most of the people working in the space. But you can see in this plan, it's still very office heavy, workstation heavy, but we've at least moved the offices inside. The team-oriented model. So this is where you start to get these mix of spaces. What are those type of mix of spaces? Do you have the collaboration? Do you have those chance meeting spaces? There we go. So in the plan module, that might mean you have neighborhoods, or you have different working areas. Those areas don't all have to be the same. Your HR team and your engineering team may have very different needs, but they're built into a plan in neighborhoods. So each of those working environments can work together, and you create zones for people to work within.
What's great now is we have great furniture systems that are out there that they can easily be reconfigured into kind of specific for each of your groups, so that it's more functionally appropriate.
So then you get into the co-working model. So this is where you have a variety of spaces within the spaces. They're all flexible. To one extreme, that's the free address. To another extreme, that's more agile. And the difference between those two terms, when we're talking agile workspace, that's you still have your assigned seat, you still come to work every day, you still have where your dedicated spaces are, but it can move and flex, and you have additional spaces. True free address means you don't have an assigned desk. You come in, you put all your stuff in a locker, you decide which space you're going to sit at that particular day. And in some cases, what we're seeing with this, you're seeing some of the CBRE Los Angeles images. They work in a full free address where you check in at the concierge and tell them what space you want to check out for the day and where you want to work. And they'll basically check it out similar to hotel concierge model.
This is maybe more of a radical departure from the traditional. And really, the success of that really comes by providing information and letting people know ahead of time that this is how you work, this is the benefit of it, this is why we're doing it. And so part of that is communication strategy as you make that commitment to going to that type of workspace.
And so what we are seeing as well in some cases where you start to see some of those third-party WeWorks or co-working facilities that may be able to be an easy way to transition into a different market and not do a full real estate investment in a full office space in a particular market until you get some bandwidth and then you open an office, but you can rent a few desks. So that may be another way that we're starting to see that being used. So this is a plan of what you're seeing with the co-working models where you start to see, it's more benching models. You see a lot of variety of types of space that you check out based on your type of work that you're doing that day. And then this is the working lab model. So this is, again, the hackable space. So how do you change things on a regular basis? So if you go to the plan view, you can start to see in an extreme model, you can actually move your workstations, change it around, move your team structure. There becomes some facility challenges with that, and how do you change the power? Some of the raised floor systems are some of the ways that can start to work. Or some of it is you keep your workstations on a static location and you make your collaboration areas more changeable, so then it's a furniture solution.
So we kind of seen that there's work modes that we kind of classify the different ways that we work. We socialize, we focus, we collaborate, and we learn.
And came out of our workplace survey, which there are some sprinkled around the room, so you have some of the research material.
So different kinds of configurations for the different types of work modes we have here, and there's a little bit of crossover between the different modes. You'll see, focus areas predominantly in your office or workstation. Collaborate, can be open area where people are getting together, or it could be conferencing. And socializing is really more your break areas, your open areas where people are having more informal meetings. And then learning, more traditional training rooms, but you could have open collaborative areas where you're having little learning sessions too. So.
And each of those areas are based off of the workplace survey and found to be, these are the different, everybody has some different version of it. This came from our workplace survey that Gensler does internally. Those are the 4 ways people work. And how those get broken up between your workspace may be different. It used to be, a few years ago, we all went to open office. It had to be all open office. That was how everybody wanted to work. But there was we came to find in the last version of our workplace survey that there is a little bit, we need to start having a little bit of that focus space back in. Some of that was being challenged. So that doesn't necessarily mean back to all office. That could just mean more phone rooms.
Right. So we went from, the traditional mode to way to the other side of the spectrum, and now we kind of come back a little bit and kind of say, well, we've learned from being all open office, so let's swing back a little bit and kind of create a space that really works for your culture.
So it's also a matter of balance, your workspace. And so we wanted to get a touch into a little bit of what does this mean and how do you decide which end of the spectrum you are and what space actually works for you. And it's a balance. It's not necessarily one size fits all. There's different categories where you have to balance your priorities. So culture and space. So culture is very important within the company spaces in making sure that you express your culture and the employee culture within your space is important, but the space efficiency, it always has to be balanced with that. So culture and space, this is a space that we did for Carly Communications downtown, and they're a single location. They're only in San Diego. They're about 20,000 square feet, so this doesn't necessarily mean it has to be only in the big facilities or only in the small facilities, but they were in 2 different sites. They need to be merged together. And so they're their strategy on this move was that they really wanted to make sure that those two sites, they felt very disconnected. It wasn't very conducive to how they wanted their culture to be. So by creating a space where they can both be in the same facility, they had some legal constraints where they had to stay separated, but we were able to keep a community core that circulated down the entire half of the plan. It allowed them to interact with each other in a more conducive way that expressed their brand, embody their company culture a little bit more.
You may have experienced that when your company's expanding and you have to take another floor, you take partial suites in other floors, and we experience that ourselves. And if you're on that other floor where the lobbies, lobbying and the executive team is, and you feel like you're detached, and that's always a challenge. So that's why culture is such a huge driver for the space that you have.
And it's both in the design of the space, but it's also in what are the procedures that you're putting in place to encourage people to use it in a particular way as well. So efficient space and effective space. Everybody wants more space. I need this, I need that, I need more storage, I need more layout space. But we need to be efficient with the space, and we need to make sure everybody has equal space, and how do you balance that? So it's going through and really critiquing how you do your work. Not just, I need this because I've had this for the last 10 years. It's really, what do you need? How do you do your work? Walking through the process of the workflow for each of the different divisions within a company, and really understanding what you really need, what's the most effective way, and breaking down, it may be a different workflow than what you think it is when you start asking people that are doing the work on a daily basis. So making sure you keep that balance in mind when you're doing the designs.
I think also technology has really changed how we all do work. There's a lot less paper. Paper doesn't go away, but there's less of it, and we're getting into more electronic filing. A little bit lighter on the file cabinets, and part of this is getting people to kind of evolve on how they, everyone wants to keep their stuff, and stuff needs space, and it's a change, and sometimes change is tough. So this is really about educating people about another way to work, and once people get comfortable with it, it really works well.
So this is a space for Classy down in downtown. Yeah.
On the previous slide, the second half, it says ensure, determine, approach projects holistically. Is there a universal advisory or guide to help you do that?
There are good rule of thumbs on what are the right ratios between collaborative space versus enclosed space. So there's some general rules of thumb that we would typically start with. And then it's really diving into what you're looking at from a workflow perspective. Which groups really have to sit next to each other, which ones don't have to sit next to each other, which ones need the storage space, which ones don't. What type of furniture solution is the right furniture solution, and can it be universally applied? Or do we need to have individuals that have key elements? Trying to use a kit of parts is one of the rule of thumbs. You'll want to try and figure out what are the kit of parts. It may be 2 sets, 2 versions. It may be 10 versions, but as long as they're still using the kit of parts and building off of each other from an office layout, from a furniture layout, from a conference room layout, that's one way to do that. Using universal sizes, so your offices are the same size as your huddle rooms, are the same size as your 2 of them equal a conference room, so that you can start to strategically move and change with something. There's some ways to do that.
Part of it also is, when you're doing a new project, is do some internal surveys. That helps, because a lot of times you don't realize what the issues are until you move into a new space, and people say, well, this is just the same as the last space we had, and it didn't solve the problem. So we use something that's called a workplace survey, and it helps to vet out, what are the issues of your current space that we can use to address in the new space. It's very effective, especially with, like I mentioned, the technology changing and how people work and how your business is evolving, because everybody's business evolves or it goes away. So we all want to evolve.
And one of the things with the survey, at whatever level it is, what it also does is there's what you think the issue is, and there's what the actual issue is. And the more you open it up more people, you'll start to really uncover what the real issue is. It's not necessarily what you think it is. I don't have enough conference rooms. There aren't enough around the space. I can't use them. Where really I don't have enough spaces for 2 people to sit down. They're all 10 people conference rooms, and if you were to divide it all up, it would actually be more effective.
Piggybacking off that question, if a facility manager were to do that survey and they were to get that information back, I would assume that changing the culture of the workplace and the way the space is designed pretty much comes from top down in terms of making that change. So once that facility manager gets that information, what are the tools that they can use to actually decide what they need to change their space, like determining the furniture, determining the spaces, determining who goes next to who? Where can they go to get that information?
So part of this is one, that data gathering. And as a facilities manager, your job is to gather the data and share it with your executive team to say, look, this is what we're seeing. And then it's up to the C-suite to say, let's be good listeners, let's do this, or no, we have a strong initiative to do something else, and that's the way we're going to do it. So part of it is kind of acceptance from the leadership team to say, we need to do something different, because this is a big move. If you're going from one space to another, it's the opportunity to kind of reinvent yourself. And if you're in an organization that is really looking to that, and what we're finding is that really your employees are your biggest asset, and that's you want to make sure you're addressing that, but also there's a balance with financial part of it too. So butts and seats, what's your ratios, those types of things. So I don't know if I really answered your question.
I guess my question is, what resources do they have to reach out to determine that information? Like, would they come to you? Would they go to a furniture manufacturer? Who would they go to first to determine how their space is to be designed?
So I'll take a little bit of a stab at that. Where if they did the survey, so if we're to use that as a benchmark, if we came in, we do the survey, it's something that we can facilitate. What comes out of that survey is it makes something that's very subjective and intangible a little bit more tangible. You can start to get some numbers, and it gets benchmarked against similar type companies that can then say, this is what's made successful. This is why it's been made successful. To the employee issue, that's your biggest dollar. So if you can say, I can get more employee retention and employee engagement by 3% more because they're here 3% more of the days, financially I get more out of those particular employees. I can show a financial gain by doing some of these strategies. So there are ways to make some of those subjective moves a little bit more objective, and you can use those tools of financial to say, this is why financially it makes sense to make some of these moves. You'll get more employee engagement. You'll be able to get employee retention a little bit more. You'll be able to effectively use your real estate more. I can go from a 60,000 square foot space to a 50,000 square foot space, and because of these results from the survey, the employees are actually okay with that if we give them this additional amenity space that came out of the survey. So you can use that data to translate it back. Did that answer it a little bit more?
Yeah, I'm just making sure. I mean, this is such a great topic, and everybody's looking to change their workspace to really match what they do. And I guess finding a lot of people don't have the vision that it takes to actually create that culture. So just going from, yes, I want to change the culture, to actually making that statement to actually do.
Well, the question is, why do you want to change your culture, your space? If it's alignment with culture, how do you align with culture, and what does that mean? And part of the challenge is that people in general are afraid of what they don't know, or it's like we're getting away from that. But when people say, well, we're going to do more workstations, everybody thinks, oh God, it's Gilbert world, right? And now with the furniture system, we've gotten so much better, and we have more visuals, and we have more spaces that you can walk through. We do a lot of walkthroughs of built sites with people that really give them a visual so they can connect to what that space feels like. And we talk about the value of daylighting. People don't see it. They don't get it until they see it. And there's many other aspects to it too. So it's
and Denise, maybe I can answer a little bit from the facility manager's perspective, because my organization is going through that right now. But for years, before we implemented an official official strategic workplace strategy, I've been doing a ton of research. I read white papers, I'm on the internet, I'm constantly collecting data. I'm visiting buildings that are already mimicking some of the spaces that I would love to see our organization adopt. So I self-taught myself to a certain point, and then when my company was ready to make that change, then I was armed with a lot of information and background and resources to help us make that next step. So that's what's worked for me. And it was a long process, right? It doesn't happen overnight when we're trying to get our organizations to make big changes. But it was well worth the 5+ years of effort, right? So, yeah.
It is hard when it's not coming from the top down. So when it's not coming from the suite down, you're going in an uphill battle a little bit. Some of the other ways is, do some of that, have this vision. Some groups may be more susceptible to it. So your engineers and your technology group, you may be able to sell them on that and be able to do a little prototype area that starts to speak to that, and that starts flowing through. Oh, everybody starts seeing that space and saying, I want to mimic that. It's another strategy of how to implement it and do some of the practice within the company.
Part of it is also looking towards the future. When you talk to your CEO, he's got a vision for where you're going to expand to, or where your growth is going to be, and how might the new space assist in that growth model, because you've got a new widget that you're coming out with, or whatever, and your workspace may need to change in 2 or 3 years, and you can plan for that to have that level of flexibility to accept it.
So one of the other balance elements is also the individual versus the community. So what's good for the overall company and what's good for the individual, and it's a constant balance back and forth between those two elements of the design of the space. So like I talked about before, it was a big push to all open office, now getting back to a little bit more focus, and what's the right balance for your users and your staff. It doesn't mean that it has to be hard walls. There could be some open, flexible transitions between those areas where you create a design that speaks to this is the area that's designed this way because it's meant for the individual. And then as soon as you get into that more community space, the design changes slightly. So it gives you that sense of which type of space are you in. So it helps respond to the activities you're trying to encourage within each of those spaces. Inside, outside. This is a big one for San Diego. So use that free real estate. Everybody wants to be outside. How do you utilize that? How do you expand out to the outside? Everybody wants to work outside. How do you extend the Wi-Fi outside? How do you open it up? Make sure you're coordinating that back with your MVP systems and building that in so that people can have that flexibility. Building it into your conference rooms. You have the ability to do it here, so when you have the opportunity, it helps the employees feel more connected.
Yeah, fresh air in the conference room. That's a really great thing. We're all in these tall buildings, or there's no fresh air. We'll talk about it on our office because we just did it. But the impact of fresh air in a space is amazing.
So showcasing a workplace. So how much is your space very public and showing to the outward community, and how much of it is heads down, we need to get work done. So this is an image of our new office, and we'll show it in a little bit. But you have your front door, and what do you show to visitors as they're coming in, and how does that tell and translate to who we are? And then as you get into the space, it's translating that into more private space. How much you can open it up and how much you want to close it down depends with what your business is and how open and what that vision is. So there's always a balance between that. Employee break areas and receptions are typically some of the easy areas to translate that into. Have a little bit of engagement with the employees themselves. They may be able to inform what they want to have done. We did a art contest for what do you want to have in your space, and it brings employees part of the process that they can then infer what they want to have as part of their space. They were engaged within it, so there's more buy-in. Beta space versus an investment space. So this is what I was talking to a little bit try things out. See how people like it. See how they, does it work out? Do they want to move it around? Do you want to?
You can take in an existing space, take a space and say, we're going to take and reconfigure this space, we're going to do it very, very differently. It's going to be a much different layout. And based on kind of maybe a survey that you've done, you can take a stab at that and do it and see if people really like it. They get to see it, and if you see that it becomes very successful, then it may set the tone for new work.
Yeah. So the next slide, you'll see you can do this a couple of different ways. We did a space for, go to the next slide. So sometimes with your lease deals, you'll have extra space, you have growth built in, but you don't want it to look vacant before you use all the space. So we used the space to try out different collaborative spaces because they knew they wanted to have it, they didn't know how they wanted to have it, so let's have some AV incorporated, let's have some reading nooks off to the side. It was powered so that you can add workstations as they grew, but it allowed them to test out which type of spaces worked for them. We also did it in our office before moving down. We took space on a lower floor and we did all different workstations so that we could all have a chance to try them out. What works, what doesn't work, it's in that flex space, so we have a chance to test it out before doing a full implementation.
So factors that drive your plan layout: tactical, cultural, and employee experience. So this is where we would like to get some feedback from you all for us. What are your operational drivers? What drives you all as far as what's important in your space from a facilities perspective? Comments? Thoughts?
Having some standards. Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah, standards are important.
We don't have any now. We don't.
Well, novel concept, right?
Yeah.
Anybody else?
Let's say efficient use of space and reducing, so in line with the standards, but being consistent, so I'm not reconfiguring every time a department changes or needs to grow that team. So I want to set the floor plan and be done. Right? And change people and their mode of working or their category of seated or mobile or agile to work with the environment that I'm setting and then get the most efficient and optimized use out of that floor plate.
Yeah. I think taking that universal planning approach where here's the baseline that everybody needs and here's the 1 or 2 or 3 add-ons that maybe can move with those people or make that minimized.
Exactly.
That's right. Exactly. So here's kind of our bullets here. And we talked about this flexibility, facility protocols, those are standards. Sorry. Economics, all this plays into it. We have to be efficient in what we do and how we can leverage technology. And as we talked about, furniture plays a big part of it because furniture allows us to be flexible. And certainly wireless allows us to be flexible too. And then finally acoustics. So acoustics are a huge issue.
So how are you seeing organizations deal with acoustics?
So you get some of the traditional, the white noise that works in some of the more open environments. You'll get some of the acoustical treatments on it. Some of it is also about placement. So there's also there's a visual connection. So there may be 2 groups that they perceive them as being loud or noisy, but if you make it so they can't see each other, that perception goes down a little bit. Huge decibel changes aren't going to change by placement, but if you reduce the visual connection, some of the noise perception goes down. So those are some of the ways that.
I think in some cases you can look at that in reverse too, because when you have the traditional 6-foot-high partitions everywhere, you have somebody who's in his workstation. He's the loud talker, right? He doesn't realize everybody around him is going, "Oh God, Joe's on the phone again," and he's loud. Whereas, now in recent years, our panel heights are coming down. So you see someone's on a headset, or headsets are on a tool. You see when people see that someone's in a workstation next to them, they can have a little bit of visual contact. They lower their voice. So and this is probably part of those office rules that you have to talk about. Be respectful of your neighbor, those types of things. And you have to kind of inform staff with that. With respect to acoustics, I mean, also, I think the other thing too is that there's a perception that acoustic panels are the best way to go, and high bay spaces, where you have raw structure because of that bigger volume, and using the air conditioning is essentially a kind of white noise. It actually works really well, and that the higher volume, rather than a traditional acoustical ceiling at 9 foot high, it can be a challenge at times.
And it,
Do you find that the same applies with placement? Because your concept of the walls being low enough to where there's a visual line, so you have an awareness that there's people around you. But right now there's just no seating area, and everybody's backs are facing each other. It's a group, so they can talk if they need to. But and I'm thinking maybe that would have the same effect with the walls being too high and limitation of privacy that you might not talk lower because you don't see
you are
people
facing
behind
and seeing the
you.
people behind
Do
you.
you see that becoming more a trend as well, that people are facing
It's
each other?
actually easier when people aren't like talking to each other, like they're facing each other. The acoustics are more of a challenge where you got someone behind you. It's not so much in your face. So that is intentional. This is a project we did for LPL. That's intentional, that they're facing in one direction. Now, it would be different if they really wanted to have a very collaborative discussion. That layout would probably be a little bit different.
And it goes back to a little bit of that balance as well. So if you know that this particular group is noisy, there's some protocols you put in place, as well as that area you may want to put in a few more phone rooms. You put in, that becomes into your planning strategy because you know this particular area may have some challenges with that. So from a balance perspective, we don't want to take away the open because that's part of our culture. So to supplement, we may want to offset and balance. So it's never one way or the other, but it's a balance between the strategies.
Yeah, this particular is a support group, so their phone room is their desk. They can't really see.
Yeah, with the call centers, and we have with one of the case stories we have in here, we did talk about one of some of the call center spaces.
Exactly.
So culture. So this is another big one. So how can your brand be embodied within your space? What are some of the ways that you can start to see how brand gets embodied within the space and strategies that you've seen implemented or you'd like implemented? Any feedback on that?
Well, you can use your merchandising if you have it, supplement what you already have. Or if you have a identified color scheme, or you can carry those throughout the organization.
Do you see that as important ways to engage the employees within what you do? It gives some purpose to the space. So retention and attraction, demographic, where you start to see, when you start to get into the younger generations, that purpose and meaning within your company becoming part of a bigger culture and purpose within the organization that I'm with. That also plays into that amenity-rich space, and that can be at all different levels. It could be if you're a small facility, you're looking for amenities close by because you may not build them into your space. If you're in a large facility, it may mean that we want to build some of that in because we want people to stay on site, but it also encourages people to interact with each other, and it helps develop that culture within the people that work in the space.
What's your staff looking for in a workplace? This is where the surveys come in. When you talk about, hey, we're going to be moving, what's important to you? There'll be people saying, oh yeah, we want to have a pool, or I want to do this, we want to do this. There'll be some some flyers out there, but you'll get some good information as far as how you can make the space more comfortable for your staff. That's the critical item. Any thoughts on that from your current spaces that you're in?
We all want free food.
Food is huge.
We all want free food. And nail salon. A laundromat.
And you're starting to get that with those
Right.
concierge models.
Right.
Whether you actually have it on site, but a lot of places aren't going to have those type of things on site unless you're big enough to facilitate.
And that's the
it.
challenge with the smaller spaces, smaller offices, that to be able to have those types of amenities. One way to look at that is to be in a campus that that's a big part of this, is keeping people from having to drive, go get Starbucks. If you have a little Starbucks-like kiosk someplace on your site, you'd be amazed what people do for coffee. It's just, we have, a number of clients that are really, they see it. They would rather their staff, get a fancy coffee, as I call it, in their office rather than have to go and leave the office for 45 minutes.
Well, we've had clients that actually have done the studies where financially, if we can offer a concierge service and I can have dry cleaning done on site, some employees can order their meals and have them delivered, so before they leave work, their food is picked up, or in some extremes, having their groceries picked up and dropped off at the space, they'll stay on site an hour or two longer. They've now got more hours back in their day. Their work is facilitated, making their live-work balance better. And financially, you've got more hours out of the various employees by doing that. So financially, there may be a gain. You can do that study and whether that works for your organization.
But free food trumps all.
Yes.
Be clear.
Are there any studies, access to any studies that show a concierge or a day porter? I mean, we get access to some sort of, do you know of any place we can get?
Public studies, I'm not aware of any. I have access to a couple of studies that we have 2 clients that have done it internally. I can check and see how public and if we can distribute those, where they have done studies where that financially has made sense. So we have access to some of those reports. I can check and see if I can distribute those.
There's a lot of on-site services who are impacted by that today. Who does everyone go to when they need some help getting something from the car? They go to the custodian. They take them away from cleaning tasks.
Yeah.
They go to the receptionist and say, "Can you watch this while I'm?" And so it's interesting to hear you say that there are actually studies that show that having someone dedicated to that task, that service task of ordering, pays off in the long run because you're not distracting someone else from their duty.
Yeah, and we have it both in an internal facilities standpoint, for internal having 2 or 3 people dedicated to that from a company standpoint. We've also worked with building owners that offer that service to their tenants as a financial service, so that if you're not big enough to justify having 2 people on staff to do this, some of the building owners are actually seeing the value of attracting more tenants if they offer that as part of their building amenity.
We're in a building that it provides a free shuttle service to the airport, which is really great if you don't have to worry about the taxi, whatever. You just schedule it and go. So it really is a nice feature. That's one of them.
What success have you folks had with regard to the integration of childcare into your larger facilities?
It's slower, right? We have seen that more in more of our Northern California. We've seen that some of the big campuses.
Really good.
Haven't really seen it as much here in San Diego really being implemented a lot yet. But there is the trend out there that we're starting to hear talked about.
So that's probably on the lower list of all the things we've talked about. Wellness centers is another one where, getting your vaccination, that type of thing. We did that for Viasat, and they're expanding it now because it's become such a very popular thing. People will actually bring their kids there rather than go to the doctor and do that. So again, part of that is it's easier to do when you're a bigger site. Yes.
Then what's the volatility with that? Because you may be chasing after a wellness center or a daycare center, and that's the fad for the year, and all of a sudden Starbucks cart becomes the fad for the year, and then you chase after it.
Well, part of this is really being in tune with your employees, and starting with their surveys, or at least having some sort of a touch point. What is important. And big people realize that you can't do everything. On a bigger campus, if the Googles of the world, they do it all. They shuttle you from your car, to the campus. So we don't have too many Googles around here. So we have to kind of look at that a little bit different. part of it is making your executive staff realize the demographics of your office, because people are going to, transition, or you're going to have younger staff transitioning, and if it's key for you to be able to provide a cool workspace, and you've got a senior team, and then you've got younger staff that are supporting it. I think you have to cater to them a little bit, and especially if you're trying to compete for key staff. A lot of it is about competing for the best and brightest.
Different markets are different. So, when you start looking at, if I'm in a technology firm, your demographic and who you're attracting, they're a little bit, they have a little bit bigger bandwidth. If you're a law firm, it's a little bit more, strategic and rigid, and, we're starting to get to see some of the trends happening as you're filtering through, not every partner has an admin, you're starting to get some secretarial. So you're starting to, it filters less. So you have to look at what market sector you're on, figure out how far you want to push some of these more integrated strategies, I would call them.
Right, and it could be that it is a conservative industry to some degree, but there's still the wave of technology, the wave of new flow of new staff, that it's younger generation, and it's a product that you're trying to present to the in-between generation that came from technology, and it's the adult environment. So.
Right, and maybe that you focus more in those environments. You focus more on strategic areas, but your workspace still stays a little bit more traditional. That you make those break areas, you make those amenity areas available and integrated, and that's where that crossover can happen a little bit more. That might be a way to strategically bring it in to cater to both, depending on what your demographic is, and it helps you slowly translate it back to the rest of your space.
Thank you.
So I know we're getting close on time, so we do have some case stories that we'll kind of go through quickly too.
So one of the things that we know is a challenge is that if you've got a small space, less than, we call it less than 10,000 square feet, you're typically going to be a partial tenant on the floor. You've got building amenities that you'll look for. So if you're in an office park that has some of those amenities we've been talking about, those are desirable. Your tenant improvement costs are a little bit more because they're not distributed over a larger square footage. There's certainly an efficiency of scale. The larger you get, you have more opportunities to layer in amenity space. The 10 to 50,000, you could be on a full floor, which with full floors now with codes, you can eliminate those fire-rated corridors, which is a huge savings. You can get a lot more efficiency. We've got a number of clients that have chosen to reconfigure a floor because they can eliminate those hallways, and that makes a big difference. You get you a lot more efficiency. And then certainly from the 50,000 square foot up, you have a lot more flexibility. You can kind of leverage some of those outdoor spaces that are part of your campus, and you can spread your costs a little bit more that way. So a couple project stories. We'll just kind of go through these real quick, just out of respect for time, because people have to be on their way. Microsoft Moffett Towers is a project that was up in Silicon Valley. We did 5 years ago. Their challenge was they were combining 5 or 6 different smaller sites, all 2-story suburban offices that were kind of startup and bringing them all together, and they're going into an office tower. So very different culture, going from a horizontal campus to a vertical campus. Very, very different. So we went through a lot of change management with that. We discovered some things that we didn't even think about, but because we went through kind of a visioning and a change management process, we learned some interesting things, and I'll show the plans here. So this is one of the floors, and you'll see in the big blue box there, do a little exploded view. Those offices are 7 by 9 offices. Okay, it seems kind of radical, right? But they also wanted to maintain a little bit of collaboration. So you'll see in between those 7x9 offices, they have collaborative space. So these are guys that are writing code. So they sit in their office when they want to have private time write code, they sit in their office, boom, they do their code. But then they need to come out and collaborate. So by doing that, we're able to maintain the efficiency of the floor and still get a collaborative environment for them. In the same building, they had another group that we called the speech group, where they didn't want to have their individual office, they wanted to be open. So they had we call them 120 workstations. And then we created some phone booths and some open collaborative areas. Kind of a blow up example. So one of the unique things we found is that, Stacy mentioned earlier, we don't have enough conference space. What we did surveys where we actually did seat sensors, and what we found out, and we did surveys of the existing conference rooms. They had a lot of existing conference rooms that were 8 and 15-person conference rooms, and there were 2 people in them. So what we did is we changed the model, and we went to creating a lot of 4-person conference rooms. The lower right-hand picture is a picture. We made sure there was technology in the room, 4 seats in the room, and those rooms get used the most. And they're a third of the size of the other conference rooms. Well, Renovate America is the existing HP campus. HP did a sale leaseback, and you can see what's in bold there is kind of the east side of the campus. Renovate America is a growing company. They're currently 2 different sites. So what we're doing for them is we're repurposing the existing office building, which is the big space, and then adding a cafeteria and a small lobby for them. This is kind of a visual. This is about that amenity space. So a lot of outside space and they have a cafeteria, and currently their food is free. They feed everybody at lunch. That's kind of the extreme model. Not too many people do that. What's interesting about this is it's 3 floors for the office building. There's a call center on the first floor, so that's pretty high density, and you can see we have kind of a modified 120 model. You can see how those work. And there's a training area there. Second floor is our technology, where they have a lot more rooms where they'll do software creation and do a lot of dry marker board work. And then the third floor we call professional service, which is executive team, accounting, legal, marketing, that type of thing. 3 different floors, 1 company. 3 different work styles, 1 company. So when we talk about work styles, it may not be one work style for everybody. You may have multiple departments that have different work styles. You can do it with the same furniture. It's just a matter of how you reconfigure the furniture. But the other thing we did is you'll notice like we have offices that are 10 by 12 offices. The executive offices are 10 by, they're 10 by 20. So that we're basically 2 small offices turned into 1 big office. So we have the flexibility to convert those. LPL in the UTC area. This was really about modules and also ergonomics, air quality, comfort controls. In this building, we did a raised floor, so all the air was coming up from the floor. So it was I think it was a 12-inch floor, and demountable walls everywhere. So it gave them the ability to change rooms up very quickly. You wouldn't have to do a new permit for changing a department up. You just have to reconfigure.
How did you handle the transitions from the circulation, like the elevator and stairs and such?
So at the elevator, that's where it's traditional floor, and then you end up having a transition so that from a hard construction perspective, there's a concrete slab, and then there's a drop down as you get outside of the elevator core. So technology, a lot of wireless, which they use everywhere, even in their cafeterias. The flexible infrastructure, it's all the quick connects for their spider boxes below the floor, so they could really very easily connect. Typical floor, it's different types of workstation configurations.
So, and then in our new office alluded to, this will be the first well built out in San Diego. So this is more focused. We really wanted to focus on creating spaces, collaborative space, and focus on the employee engagement. So we have a centralized collaboration core, and then we went to a much more open office. So we don't have a lot of storage space at our desks themselves, but with that circulation spine down the center is really our collaboration space. So we have just under 100 people on staff. We have 200 collaboration seats. So it's a matter of creating that level of choice either in a conference room, in an outdoor lounge space, because of the type of business that we do. We'll go through these. I do want to touch on the well strategy that we have on the next slide. The second floor is a little bit more traditional layout, so we do have that choice of space. And then we did focus on making that passive ventilation. So our first floor is entirely passively ventilated. We have louvers that were invested in the perimeter screen. They go up through the smokestack for ventilation, so we have a rooftop deck. So this is all about the mechanical system, making that more efficient, making our indoor air quality better, and putting into systems in place where we actually have well strategies. It's healthier food that gets brought in, no sodas in the space. There's some protocols that also come with being well certified that got implemented within the space. So kind of sped through the last